I've always had the goal of being a deep, free, and original thinker, but that goal wasn't always a conscious goal. At the start, as the self-actualization process goes, it started as an unconscious goal. It was very shallow. I wanted to become a deep and free thinker for the sake of others' acceptance. I wanted to sound smart, intellectual, and deep, but I didn't really care about being a deep thinker. I cared about being accepted by others, but in a non-mediocre way. I wanted to be different. With time and after burning through that karma, I realized that becoming a deep thinker is more than that. It is the key to creative success or success in any endeavor in your life. If you want original success or you want to pave a new way for not only your own life, but a new path for others to follow, then you have to prioritize deep, free, and original thinking. But before we can understand what deep thinking actually is, we need to understand the opposite. We need to understand what shallow thinking is. Shallow thinking is taking what you see as law and never seeing beyond your sensory perceptions, or thinking that what you see is all there is, thinking that a piece of the cosmic puzzle or a little piece of the cosmic image is all that there is. You see the piece and you think that's it. There's nothing beyond that. There's no depth. There's no connection. There's no relationship to other things. There's nowhere else for your mind to go, so it gets stuck there. It gets closed off or closed-minded to that little thing that you are focused on, narrow focus, not being able to see or open your mind to the potential of other things. And that is the problem. I talk about closed-mindedness so much because open-mindedness, radical open-mindedness, and being open and critical with your thinking is extremely important to any kind of creative work. Because taking what you see or perceive with any of your senses, any of your five senses, sight, sound, taste, whatever it may be, touch, it doesn't make sense to have complete and utter faith in that one specific thing, because our sensory perceptions and how we interpret things are backed by our conditioning, so how we were raised, the environment that we live in, the context or lens that we are viewing the world from, the goals that every single individual is pursuing, whether they're conscious of those goals or not. Like working a job, you are probably unconsciously pursuing the goal of your boss. And so it doesn't make sense because everyone is going to interpret whatever they see in a different way. And then closing your mind off to that one thing is what sparks argument. That's what sparks debates in the comment section or whatever it may be. It's your inability to see beyond what is said or heard or seen or whatever it may be. Because you also have to understand that animals, a lot of them have different perceptions than us. They can see different things than us. Like dogs, for example, can hear different frequencies that we will never be able to hear. Frogs, some types of frogs, I don't know which ones, but they can see differently. I don't know if it's different colors, but you have to understand that there may be more colors out there. Who the fuck knows? And so, like, you can sit and think about this, right? Practice as we're going through this entire video, deep thinking, and just not taking what you see as law or taking that diet fad that you see on social media as the only specific way because,
oh, I cut out junk food and started the carnivore diet, so the carnivore diet is the best diet for everyone. And it wasn't because I just cut the bad food out of my diet, so there's no other option. And
you can see where this goes. There's infinite nuance. If it is speakable, then it is infinitely debatable if you do not open your mind to seeing beyond or just holding the nuance in your own head with those things. So deep thinking is becoming aware of the limits your mind creates. Because that's all humans do. We create limitations. We create distinctions between two different things. That's how we learn. Holding everything you perceive in the realm of possibility until filtered with direct experience. This is critical thinking, right? Not taking what you think is law. Holding it in your head without labeling or judging or just attaching to it whatever meaning you can. You hold it in the realm of possibility until you come into direct experience to ground that information. Questioning everything, especially the thoughts, beliefs, and biases that you think are absolutely true without exception. So in short, closed-mindedness is the antagonist to deep thinking. But what is closed-mindedness. It is accepting the matrix as your reality. Yes, we're going to talk about the Matrix, because when most people talk about the Matrix, they think of the movie with Neo and all of them. I've seen it once, I don't remember much from it, but you understand that there's a red pill and a blue pill. If you take the red pill, you break out of the Matrix. You take the blue pill, you're kind of a slave to it. You're just an NPC, a robot. And let's dive into this, because the first thing that we have to understand is that all understanding is metaphorical. Think about that. So we get hints of truth at what the Matrix is, the metaphorical matrix that this movie is trying to point us towards. We can comprehend the essence behind what it's saying. But the notion of the matrix is a symbol. And you can kind of think about this and understand that this is not only applied to the matrix, this applies to everything. Symbol, noun, a thing that represents or stands for something else, especially a material object representing something abstract. Since the beginning of time, before we invented language, we interpreted reality by recognizing patterns and relationships. We used symbols to represent these phenomena or the experience or the essence that came from those aspects of reality. Now, understand this. A symbol is a representation. It is not what it is. It is a representation of what is. It is not what it is. This brings up the whole concept of being and knowing. Being is first order, knowing is second order. You can't know until something is being or has come into being. So with time, groups of people began to share and attach meaning to these representations. That gave us a way to communicate. But people had different perspectives on these things based on their environment and prior experience, meaning that there is no absolute truth to the language that we have created, right? As we talked about earlier, the meaning of any given thing is up to an individual's perception of that thing. It is up to an individual's interpretation of that thing. So you have to understand that these symbols or these limits on reality that we have created are mental constructions. They are mental interpretations. A layer over reality, a limit that our mind has created on infinity. So with time, these mental constructions have become more advanced. We built on top of them layer after layer after layer. Language has advanced. We write books, strings of language. We create videos now. We've created the school system, the government, culture, society, and a load of other expectations, assumptions, and predictions that we call beliefs for what life has been and should be, not what it is. So think of the Matrix as a web of expectations that has been conditioned into our minds. Everything in this room that I'm in and the room that you're in has meaning that has been projected on it from our minds without any conscious effort, because it has just been repeated to us over time. And we are repetitive beings. And so the neural networks in our brain, whatever, it's like the Grand Canyon with water flowing through it and creating the grooves in our head so that the water can flow effortlessly. And we project meaning and accept what we see as law. Now, there's a trap here where it's like, Dan, so you're just saying nothing exists? And like, in essence, I am, but this is where the balance of spirituality and practicality comes into play. There's a balance there. They have to exist. There's polarity. I just want you to see the side of the picture that not many people see, that is preventing them from becoming a deep thinker or a creative thinker. You can live and die inside these intellectual structures if you choose to, but people of curiosity usually find themselves unsatisfied with the conventional answers. That is a quote that I took from a lecture from Terence McKenna. My friend, in the comments, you recommended me to watch something from Terence McKenna. I appreciate you. Don't have your name right now, but thank you for turning me on to him. I would like to go ahead and expand that favor to you all. Search Terence McKenna lecture on YouTube. Go on a walk, listen to it. Buy YouTube Pro so you can turn off your phone and still listen and just let things go. That's what I like to do. Alan Watts lectures, actualize.org, Terence McKenna, those are all great places to kind of expand your mind and not get sucked into some kind of cheap dopamine cycle on social media. These are long lectures that I would encourage you to take multiple days, if not weeks, to listen to and munch on the ideas, not be bombarded by 500 ideas a day just by scrolling through social media and overwhelming your mind and not having any clarity on what to do with your future. I could go on and on about how we are such a robotic species. We have much less self-control than we believe we do. As an example, I want to talk about cycles, patterns, rhythms, and just normalization in general. So think about the cycles in your personal life. We have an ingestion cycle, what we eat. We have an excretion cycle, so how you go to the bathroom every day, right? Do you even think about that? Or is it like, I have to go, I'm going to the bathroom right now, and that happens on a cycle, right? That's kind of a microcycle from day to day. But we also have a sex cycle. Even if you don't have a partner, you dirty dog. We have a work cycle. And even just this past week, I've been having migraines every morning. It sucks. If you've had a migraine, not a headache, don't act like you've had a migraine if you've only had a headache. If you've had a migraine, you know you had a migraine, and that shit sucks, right? It just sucks. And it's weird because this is a cycle that I've noticed. It happens every 3 years in my life, and I haven't pinpointed why it happens. Maybe it's just random, but me noticing these cycles helps me break out of that and potentially create a solution for that. This is probably a very bad practice. I didn't have a migraine this morning because caffeine helps with migraines. I put a Diet Mountain Dew by my bed. And the first thing I did when I wake up is chug that Mountain Dew, and I didn't have a migraine. So caffeine works, not something I'm going to sustain for a long time, but it's just funny to think about. And these personal cycles can also vary for the hobbies you do or the goals you're trying to achieve. Like a bodybuilder, for example, has cutting and bulking cycles. They also have possibly a more frequent ingestion cycle of meals, right? Eat 5 to 6 meals a day, and that kind of controls their life. And then even more so, you can see how deep this goes, where there can be business cycles as well. There are business cycles because business is fairly unpredictable in many cases. Some of my content is going to do very good. Sometimes it's going to do very bad. And I just have to accept that. Sometimes I'm going to have a high month. Sometimes I'm going to have a low month. I can control that to an extent in terms of my income or my content doing well. But overall, the high highs aren't sustainable. High highs imply that there are going to be low lows, and so on and so forth. And so speaking of seasons, the world as a whole, or the cosmos as a whole, seems to occur in cycles from the top down. And these impact human behavior. So it goes like cosmic, worldly, cultural, societal, social, personal. There may be more in between that, but those are major things. Like in a social situation, how you mirror someone else's body as the conversation goes on. That's a cycle that you may not be conscious of or in control of. Or how as a culture in the States, we celebrate Halloween, right? Or Christmas or Thanksgiving. And these things come up in cycles and we prepare for them and we do things unconsciously according to those things. Or when winter comes or when summer comes, we change the clothes that we wear. And all of these different things that we don't have to give conscious thought because they're cyclical, they're repetitive, they're conditioned into our brains. And even more so, something that a lot of people should become conscious of over these coming months is the political cycles and how a lot of people get overly emotional during those times simply because they're unconscious and they have certain expectations and beliefs for the mental construction that other people have created for certain individuals that attached to those mental constructions can reside in as a home. Like the Terence McKenna quote from earlier, if you subscribe to a political ideology and someone threatens that house of a mental home that you live in or a mental construction that you live in, they threaten the foundation, they try to tear that construction apart. You as a being are going to feel threatened. You're going to have a stress response. You're going to get emotional without your own control. You're not going to be mindful of it. And then things are going to go to shit and you're not going to enjoy your life simply because you don't understand that the impacts of closed-mindedness that we're talking about throughout this entire thing, your inability to see and think deeper. So to summarize all of that, the matrix is what you think you know. And the way you break free of the matrix or create a glitch in the matrix is to break free of your robotic behavior, to become conscious of and break free of your robotic behavior by doing something different. Now, this is a bad and extreme example, but it's doable, right? You're gonna live. But if you're going through a sleep cycle and you want to make some new discoveries or you want to kind of notice things that you haven't noticed before, this is just one example. Don't sleep for a night. Break the sleep cycle, right? Break the sleep cycle. Don't sleep. Wake up the next day and notice how your mind reacts. Notice how it tries to revert back. Now, of course, a lot of this is biological, but you're going to make some interesting discoveries about yourself. And just the world. Now, this doesn't only apply to sleeping, but it just means breaking out of the cycles that you have control over. So the personal cycles, like intermittent fasting. If you haven't tried intermittent fasting or fasting as a whole, fast for a day, fast from food, don't eat. Because whether you like it or not, if you don't break free of these cycles, you are extremely similar to other people, and you are going to get the same results as other people in life. And one cycle that I would encourage everyone to break is the conventional work or employee cycle. At least try building a hobby project and potentially see it growing into some kind of business or something that you have more control over. And so what do you find? What do you find when you break out of this matrix, or just this web of expectations, or this elaborate and complex matrix or construction in our mind that we have created and reside in for comfort? When you break out of it, or you try to see beyond it, you are going to experience the mystical, the profound, and the unknown, waiting to be explored. And now the trap here is to think that you can articulate these things, right? This is what spiritual people have trouble with, is like trying to get people to try spiritual things because you experience something mystical. You have a mystical experience and you can't put it into words, because it can't be put into words, because it is being. You don't know it. It's not something that has been conditioned into our brain. It is something that you learn to not surrender to. You can surrender to it. That's where the concept of surrender and faith come into play. But you get to explore it freely. You get to explore the matrix freely and understand what it is, and that it is just a way of us organizing and making sense of the mystical that is under us, the infinite intelligence that is under us. And so once you awaken to the fact that there is this intelligence beneath us, you can begin to explore it. And with that, you can bring your findings into your creative work, your creations, your content, your videos, your speaking with other people in social situations and everything like that. And so this is what creativity is, right? When you think of a creative, you think of like an artist sitting there, and do you think they're just like brooding over some political election? No, they're in a deep, restful state, and they're letting their creative abilities come into play. Your edge is where you stop short, or where you compromise your fullest gift, and instead cater to your fears. David Data. That is a quote from The Way of the Superior Man. Great book. Highly recommend it. So in relation to deep thinking, the matrix keeps us trapped in all of these surface level thoughts. So in order to reverse this effect, we have to tap into the unknown, and we have to seek to explore the unknown. But the thing with this is that you can't just throw yourself into the unknown. You can't just hurl yourself into the middle of the ocean if you don't know how to swim and expect to survive, or at least expect, in this case, in the metaphorical sense and in a way that we're thinking about now, expect your mental construction or yourself, the notion of self, to survive. Because that's just the thing. Mystics and gurus and monks, they kind of reside in this unknown territory, and they have no sense of self. They have eradicated that. No self. If you've heard of the term no self, this is what we're talking about here, where they don't play the game of the material world. Now, I haven't reached this point yet. I don't know if I'll ever reach this point. I don't know if I want to reach this point. It's like Alan Watts. He called himself a bodhisattva, where he has experienced the mystical, but he chooses to live in this material world and kind of balance back and forth between the two. He plays the external game, but he knows that the mystical place, he knows that it is there for him when he needs it, for the calmness and the creativity that is there. So here's a graphic that I made for a last video, and it just shows the unknown is the big black area all around. And if you launch yourself too far into it, or you push too far out of the known, then you get anxious. But if you stay too far within the known, or this matrix that we have locked ourselves into, then you get kind of bored. You think that life doesn't have meaning, and you start to believe that there really is no point. But when you live at the edge, or when you push, or when you're at the edge of your fears, or that fear kicks into place, are you going to hide back in the known, or your little comfortable home in your mind? Or are you going to push out a bit and expose yourself to deeper experiences? Now, this is just the thing. You have to start exposing yourself to deeper experiences if you want to kind of unlock that experience to tap back into when it comes time to think deeply, creatively, or even freely. So at the start, our goal is to just get a bit uncomfortable. We want to puncture the known. We want to puncture it with consistent effort and let obsession pull us deeper when we find a novel discovery. That is, when we get that hit of excitement or dopamine when we make a new discovery. Let's say we're struggling. We're struggling to read something, and we come across something that we normally wouldn't have had before if we just like skimmed through it and didn't pay attention to the depth of knowledge that is within a book. And it makes you want to research another thing and another thing and another thing. And you realize that you're starting to explore this intelligence without being conscious of it, because you're going from connection, and then you're reflecting and you're understanding the patterns that are showing there and how these things are connected, right? I've talked about in previous videos, like the rise of the value creator, where a value creator's job is to explore the unknown and make new discoveries by researching the crevice of reality that they feel the most compelled to. So if you're researching fitness, right, you're researching this little domain, and your job is to just connect all of these dots by pushing the boundaries of what you think you know. So to understand the progression of pushing into the unknown, or kind of opening our mind, if you go back to that graphic that I showed about the known and the unknown, think of the known as your mind, and the line around it is the closed-minded nature of your mind, right? And so when you're pushing into the unknown, you're kind of expanding your mind. You're expanding that barrier of the known until it encompasses so much more that you can tap into, rather than just what you've been taught in school, the experiences you've gone through that everyone else has gone through, and just living the normal, ordinary life that most people are living. If you're watching this video, I'm assuming you want more out of life. You want to do great things in this world. If that's not you, then don't watch this video or don't watch my channel. So let's talk about states and stages. States are a temporary state of consciousness that you can break into at any time. Like taking a psychedelic, reading a quote that eases your worries, or feeling extra creative after you write a few words. Stages, on the other hand, are a permanent stage of consciousness, like reaching a new level in a game where you have access to the powers you could only previously receive with a power-up. Like a baseline level of happiness, this takes development over time and does not eliminate regressing into lower states of consciousness, like being stuck in a rut. So a state, when you think of that graphic, a state is like you're kind of launched into the unknown. You have a peak mystical experience, but you can't sustain that because you haven't gone through the stages in order to maintain that. Or when you are just feeling extra creative or something like that. And so with a stage comes from experience exposure. It comes from gradually taking the steps to get to a certain place. Like in business, right? You don't just go from 0 to $1 million a month. You go from 0 to 100 or 1,000, then you go to 5,000, and you slowly work your way up. It's all an exponential curve. And so our goal is to reach new stages in the unknown, or expand our mind to new stages of consciousness. And that is to expose yourself to new experiences in every aspect or facet of your life. And then this leads to a deeper awareness of what is possible. Because you can't improve what you aren't aware of. You can't take action on what you aren't aware of, right? If you're trying to get into business and you're seeing all these people pull in a ton of money, you're not going to have the skill set that they have, right? You have to start with one skill, like web design, and then open your awareness to like, oh, I could make this skill better by stacking it with copywriting. And now you have web design and copywriting, and you can that skill becomes much more effective. And it's like, okay, well, what comes next, right? Then you open your mind to, let's say, email marketing. You tack that on, you add a lead magnet or an opt-in to your page, you have some email sequences, and these skills stack over time. So you're not going to be able to get to expert level of having this perfect set of skills that makes a ton of money until you learn the first skill. So as an example, and a humble flex, if you will, just because it's recent to me, it's a new experience to me, and it's fresh in my mind, and that's why I use it in my newsletters and in my videos for this time around, is that when I started in business, I made my first $300 selling web design, right? Then I got better. I stayed consistent. I learned new things through experience that wouldn't have been able to be taught in a course. And then over time, I hit a high month of $10,000, but my baseline was still like $2,000 a month, right? But then I kept going, and then the state would increase to I had my first $50,000 month, and then my baseline was $20,000. And then recently I've had two $100,000 months in a row. And now my baseline is maybe, I don't know what it is yet, but it could be like $50,000. It could have jumped exponentially higher. I'm not sure. That's going to take time for me to understand. But then when I have a state of like my first $1 million in half a year, then my baseline is going to increase whatever it may be. And hopefully I can stop and balance around $1 million a year. I feel like that's probably too much. I don't know. We'll see when we get there. Because that's the thing, is you don't know until you accomplish it, right? That's what a lot of people fail to see. I fail to see it. Everyone fails to see it at some point in their life. But it's like a lot of people talk shit about others for their certain situation, specifically with celebrities or something else. Like you see people in the comment section and they're like, like, yeah, this guy is this, and this. They're just assuming expectations. They're living in a web of expectations that has been conditioned into their brain, and they're projecting those assumptions and expectations on the other people. Like, oh, this person's unhappy. Oh, this person should do this with their money, or they should do that. And it's like, you don't know what they know. You don't know what they should do with their money until you've experienced where they're at through action and gaining experience and have lived the life that they've lived. Then most, if not all, of the words that you are speaking about them are just complete and utter nonsense and completely worthless. It's like you have better things to do with your time. Go and improve your own life so you can experience things and make better decisions for yourself, because no one's ever going to make you happy, right? This is a common saying, but it's like, it's not going to make you happy if they go and give $1 million to charity, because then you're going to pick something else up and just get stuck in this continual trap of blaming other people for their problems and not even worrying about your own. So back on track, the slow and consistent steps to expanding your mind and just experience of the world in stages, slow and consistent stages with occasional states that like bust into higher and higher levels, and you get a peak into that level so you have something to work towards. But there are times when intense growth makes sense, right? And that's usually a product of consistent growth, right? You can, if you're not acting consistently, you're never going to give your chance at intensity. But sometimes the things just make sense, right? When you feel the pull or you feel the call to move across the country, drop everything, sell all of your stuff, and go live a new life, and you really feel that, you've been thinking about it for a fucking year, and you haven't gone and done it yet, you haven't gone and experienced it, maybe it's time. Take the leap. Because that stressful environment, that pressure, that something on the line, like moving to another country and having to fight for your survival in order to get to a new stage or baseline where you can survive there, may be what you need in order to make all of that progress. So here's a tweet of mine that got some good engagement. It's one of my top tweets that people seem to like, and it summarizes all of this pretty well. If you're lost, the answer is education. If you're educated, the answer is action. If you are acting, the answer is consistency. So it only makes sense to match knowledge with execution. You don't want to learn from someone that's 10 stages ahead of you, because it's not going to make sense. You don't understand what's there. You need to learn from someone that's one stage ahead of you, and then you need to match that execution so you become aware of that little bubble of awareness that they have at stage 2, and then you go to stage 3 and you slowly expand your awareness to encapsulate everything that you're experiencing and learning along the way. And this is how you create good dopamine. Cheap dopamine comes from receiving novelty without struggle. Good dopamine comes from creating novelty through struggle. Now, here's a graphic where you can see this. You have you on one end, instant desire on the other hand. Bing, 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 bing. You got dopamine right there. Then you have you and intrinsic desire and the highs and lows that come with that, right? The highs and lows are necessary because that's where you get good dopamine. It's not just instant. It's not at the click of a phone or just like looking at your phone. It comes from what we've been talking about this entire time. Breaking free of the matrix through experience exposure. Exposing yourself to new experiences on a consistent basis. So, meaning you have to set your own goals. Educate yourself on how to reach them and execute at the edge of your fear. If you have problems with fear, go and watch my video on why fear of failure is ruining your life. I feel like that's an underrated video of mine, and it should really help reframe what you think of fear and failure. And just to make a connection about the cycles that we talked about earlier, you could consider cheap dopamine a part of your cycle, right? How often do you check your phone every day? How compulsive is it? Do you even know when you're like, are you conscious of the fact that you're pulling your phone out of your pocket and staring at it and starting to scroll. And so while there's many methods for breaking out of your comfort zone or diving into the unknown or exposing yourself to new experiences, here are 3 or 4 that are readily available to you right now and that you can do on a consistent basis. You can make this a part of your daily practice. So the first one is reading, right? And a lot of people, they don't read because it's a lot of stuff. They're not getting that quick, valuable information without the fluff. All of a sudden, when the fluff is where you're going to make new discoveries, that's the stupidest argument I've ever heard. Is like, oh, I want the value without the fluff. And it's like, the fluff is where the magic happens. So when you read, don't stop at the first hint of struggle or lack of comprehension. That's where you're going to prime your mind to actually learn the lesson that is trying to teach you, whether it be 1 year or 10 years, right? When I first read a book, let's say The Power of Now, I didn't understand some of its teachings, but then when I come back and read it 5 years later, I understand it all. And that's because I primed my mind to try to experience those things in my life just because I read it on paper. But now, when you're reading and you catch a whiff of something that's interesting or that excites you, don't neglect that. Stop reading and start researching it further, right? If you're reading a book on fitness and you read something about muscular tension and you're like, I don't know what that is, I want to learn more, and you start reading about muscular tension, it takes you down this rabbit hole and eventually you become obsessed with fitness and you create a lifestyle out of it. So number 2 is writing. Every single writer or creative struggles with writers or creative blocks. And people think this is a bad thing when it is the best thing that could ever happen to you. This is when your mind is ready to munch on those problems, right? This is when you go on a walk. This is when you drop things after you hit a wall with your writing. This implies that you have to start writing. When you hit a wall with your writing, you go on a walk, you lay by the pool, you rest, you let your brain turn on the default mode network so it can start munching on those problems in your subconscious mind. And then out of nowhere, boom, you have this revelation or this discovery or an idea is sent to your conscious mind and you write that down and then you're able to continue writing, right? Because if you're stuck in this instant gratification mindset and you're like, fuck, like, oh, I can't write this, and this right now, then put it down. You're allowed to write a piece over the entirety of a week or a month or however long it takes. And so if you want to get into writing, check out my course, The 2-Hour Writer. I attribute almost everything in my life to writing, right? My mental health, my business success, all content is based around writing, even this YouTube video, my Instagram, my Twitter, my LinkedIn, it's all writing. My podcast, it all starts with a script. That is the most profitable and non-replaceable skill that you can learn. Creative skill that you can learn that just pairs with any other skill you choose to learn. So number 3 is teaching, because our goal is to become a deep, original, and free thinker. But I'm going to save number 3. I wrote this earlier in my newsletter. If you're not on it, join it. But I wrote about teaching in the next video that we're going to do on how I remember everything I learn. So I don't want to do it injustice by bringing it up here, but you want to teach what you learn in order to solidify it, right? If you haven't already, look up the Feynman technique, which is where you pretty much teach what you learn, identify the knowledge gaps in where you struggle to teach things. Like if you were to teach to a YouTube video, you can watch back over it and see where you fuck up, and then you can go and fill in those knowledge gaps and then come back to teaching, and that is how you retain a lot of your knowledge. There's some study or something that shows that teaching retains the most knowledge compared to other methods. So that is it for this video. I know this one was a bit abstract, but that is the point, because I've noticed we've grown quite a bit on YouTube recently, and I've noticed that a lot of the things that get clicks and views are the one-person business videos and just like the practical lessons that I've learned, when a lot of people neglect the thing behind all of that, all of the abstractions and philosophical and creative ideas that make it work. And that's what I like dissecting the most. That's what I feel like is the most helpful, is your ability to think freely and figure things out for yourself, rather than relying on a step-by-step system to get immediate, instant gratifying results. So if you enjoyed this episode and watched to the end, please like the video, please subscribe for more. I'm going to have a balance, or I'm going to continue the balance of like practical and abstract, just because they're both extremely fucking important. And if you want to dive deeper, you can join the Modern Mastery community for $5 with the link in the description, or check out the 2-Hour Writer, or the other 2 to 3 free things that are there. There's the newsletter, power planner, and 7 Days to Genius Idea Challenge. And that's it for this video. So I appreciate you watching. Have an absolutely incredible rest of your week.